How many times have I warned people about this? This is why I pack a lot of gear. Now I'm done. My trip is finished. Today is July 3rd, but check this out. This is my ride home. I just barely got out, and I'm going back on the Highway 93, so I'm going over the Bow Summit. That's Bow Summit right there, and so it is snowing. There is a lot of snow here. Hey guys, Marty up north. Today is June 24th. Actually, it's Saint-Jean-Baptiste Day. Moi, je suis Canadien français, donc c'est la fête des Québécois. But so happy Saint John the Baptist Day to everyone. So I've been asked. So I've done a lot of videos. I think I have about 180 videos on YouTube, and you know, I have some how-to videos, and I have hiking videos of different trails I've been on. But people have actually been asking me for just a plain Jane hiking 101 video, what's the kind of gear that you need. So that's what I want to do today, just a quick video. So I've been hiking for about 28 30 years now, and I've accumulated gear, and I've gotten rid of some gear, but I just brought out a whole bunch of gear, and I want to go through the basics and do a few comparisons. So this will probably be a 2-3 part video, and then I will have appropriate breaks and links to other videos that I've done in sort of the how-to series. All right, so why hike? Well, I hike for lots of reasons. I love the outdoors. I love the solitude myself. I love being out there alone and exploring, but fundamentally I like exploring. And what happened with me over the years is I would hike with friends, but then as I wanted to go farther and farther, I started hiking alone because people wouldn't come with me, and I adapted. So I learned a lot of things over the years just because I tend to go so far. Now, this is not going to be a video about ultralight versus this or versus that. I'm just going to give you some opinions on gear that works for me and that I think would work for somebody who's trying to get into the sport for the first time. Now, my advice to somebody who's getting into the sport for the first time is follow my videos, but start small. Like, go on day hikes, you know, in and out, and bring some gear with you. Bring a backpack and go on day hikes. Then eventually go on an overnight hike and go with a friend so that you're sharing the gear, and go on a popular trail, like you know, go somewhere close in Banff, do a 10 kilometer in, 10 kilometer out. So if you do a very popular trail with a friend and there's other people there, if you forget something, you're not going to get in trouble because there'll be other people around you. Or if you get in real trouble, you can just hike back out to the car. So, I mean, people do not die doing this sport. But eventually you'll want to do a 2-day and a 3-day hike. And then you might want to do 2 days and 3 days with friends on a less popular hike. So you have to build yourself up. So don't panic at first. So this today is my advice for somebody who wants to do just you want to leave on a Saturday morning early and you want to come back on Sunday. So here's what you need. Now, one of the things, I'm an engineer, and one of the things I learned over the years is the concept of a risk assessment. So when you're hiking, you have to think about the risks. And I get a lot of questions around that. So let's think about the risks. So we live in Alberta and I hike in the mountains. So what are the real risks that I face? It's not getting lost, okay? Because people think you're gonna, you know, getting lost is when there's a plane crash and you end up in the bush somewhere and you don't know where you're at, you're lost. But if you're just hiking on a trail and exploring and you get lost, you've done something terribly wrong, because if you can't find where you're at, stop and reverse. You should always be able to go backwards. So getting lost is not a risk I worry about. But in the mountains, I absolutely worry about weather. The weather can turn quickly here. It can be raining, it can be snow, it can be sleet, it can be very cold. So hypothermia is a real risk. And then another risk for me is injury. A real risk in my risk assessment is getting injured. And the real injuries that I face is twisting a leg, maybe even breaking a limb, and then getting burned are injuries that I face. You know, and sunburn and things like that. And then the third, so getting lost, injury, weather, I've talked about. And then the fourth risk in the mountains here or around here is wildlife. And people say, you know, is there going to be risks of bears? Absolutely there is. There's always risk of bears, but there's also more commonly risks of smaller animals like squirrels getting into your food, or raccoons, or, well, not raccoons around here, but porcupines. So those are the 4 basic risks for me. It's the weather and it's hypothermia associated. then it's injury, mostly twisting an ankle or doing something, then it's animals, then it's other risks like broken gear and something that'll hinder you. So you've done the risk assessment. So I evaluate the risks, weather and things like hypothermia and rain and getting cold, injuries, mechanical failures, getting lost, which is pretty minor, and encounters with animals. So those are the broad categories of risk. And then you evaluate the likelihood of one happening and then the mitigation.
Here's a graph of actually what I was trying to explain outside. This is a typical risk matrix that we employ in as engineers. So on the bottom, there's a scale, which is the likelihood of an event occurring. So from the left, an event is not likely to occur, all the way to the right, where an event is very likely to occur. And then there's another axis, the vertical axis is the consequence. So if you think of individual hazards, like for instance, right in the middle, getting burned. So when I think of getting burned, I think it's a possibility, and the consequences will be a problem if I get burned. If I look at another risk or another hazard, something like becoming hypothermic, it's also very possible. But if I become hypothermic on the left side, I'm in trouble. So my risk matrix tells me that things that are in red or orange are things I should be concerned about. Something green, this is my opinion, it's my risk tolerance. Somebody else's might be different. But for me, something like getting lost, like I said earlier, I put it as not likely to happen. And if it did happen, the consequences are not a big problem. So as an engineer, or in this case as a hiker, the things I should worry about are the things that are in red. And then the things that are in red, then once I'm worried about them, the ones that are easy to mitigate, I really should do something about them. And the ones that are harder, well, I might put a different effort. So looking like becoming hypothermic, which shows up as a risk, is actually easy to mitigate, because the way you mitigate becoming hypothermic is you bring good clothing and a good tent. Same with the risk of getting completely wet or getting blisters can be mitigated. Some risks are harder to mitigate. But actually what this showcases is that the things that are likely to happen and cause you grief are actually things that you can mitigate. And and this also helps you to realize that certain things you shouldn't really worry about it. Should you worry about getting deathly ill? I would say not. The mitigation is to bring a first aid kit, but it's not to bring an extremely big first aid kit. So this is just something that's helpful when thinking about hiking, and it takes away some of that sense of panic. People are worried about bears or worried about sick. So this visually helps you think about what you really need to worry about.
So when you're hiking overnight, one of the number one things you need to consider is the shelter, because you're going to be at the end of the night, you're going to stay somewhere, and you need a shelter that'll keep you dry, and then you need a system for sleeping. So let's talk about shelters. For me, there's basically two kinds of shelters. There's tents, and nowadays there's people with just tarps and hammocks. And so a hammock in and of itself is not a shelter. So the only two types of real shelter that I can talk about are tents and tarps. So me personally, after 30 years of camping, I'm a tent guy, and I'm going to set up a quick tent right now. So you have choices. I hike alone, so you can bring a one-man tent, or if you hike with partners, you can bring a two-man tent, or if you hike alone, you can bring a two-man tent. I hike alone, and I bring a two-man tent for a lot of reasons. So let's set up a two-man tent. All right, so me and Ray are going to set up the two-man tent. So this is the newest two-man tent that I just got, and just for speed and efficiency, we're actually not going to put up the tarp or the fly over the tent. We are just going to set up the that's the fly. All right, Ray, start assembling the poles, please. It's just like the other one. Now this is is a nice North Face tent that I just got not too long ago. It's a 3-season tent, and in an absolute pinch it could do in winter, but you start there. This one, Ray? Nope, right here. Put it through. No, not yet. Just push it through. Okay, now Ray, your end. Put it in there. Yeah. You got it? And then I put mine in. Okay, your end in that one. Got it? Okay. And then, not all the yellow ones, but a couple will start it. And then green, Ray. Green on your side. At the very bottom. No. Back. Bottom there.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. Now, let's put these. Got it? Time! Okay. So, when I get to a site, I set up the tent quickly. Now, the fly just goes over it, and the fly gives you additional protection, and then there's a vestibule in front here where you can put gear underneath, but I'm not going to put the fly for now. We don't need it. And actually, in a very hot day, you can just set up the tent like this. And some people don't even, if you're really confident in the forecast, you don't need to put the fly over, but if it's colder in the early season or late season, you put the fly and you get additional protection. But the thing that's beautiful about a freestanding tent like this is that what I usually do is I don't actually need to exactly know where I'm going to put the tent when I show up. I can assemble the tent, and then after that I can look around my site and find an area that's going to be level. And what I do once I've found my level area is I actually get in my tent and test it out. And if I don't like the levelness, I can move it around real quick. So, Ray, get in here with me. Let's show. So, we'll, you've seen in many of my videos, if there's two of us, there's enough room. But if I'm alone or with just me and Tika, it's more than ample space. And my recommendation is not to bother with a single man tent. A single man tent is if you are really worried about weight. And the difference between the 2-person version of this tent and the 1-person version of this tent is about 400 grams, a pound. So the extra comfort of the space is worth it. So I really do not recommend a 1-person tent. And I've used a 2-person tent on 12-day trips where weight is critical. So for anybody that's considering overnights that are 2, 3, 4 days max, you can handle the weight and go with a 2-man tent. All right, let's do the 3-man while we're here. Ray, start assembling the poles. And we'll do the same thing for the 3-man. We'll only do the main body. Now the tents have a fly, pegs, and then the main, yeah, this is the main body. Corner over there. Here, I'll I actually like this tent a lot. It's just that it's on on actually, okay, that's good. So this tent is actually huge. If you compare, here, let's put it side by side, you can see quite a difference. And what I do is we bring this one on family events. Actually, when we go with 5 people, we bring these 2 tents, 3 and 2, so we're 5 people. Often when there's only 2 of us, on especially a slightly longer trip where I'm base camping and I'm going to go explore areas, then I bring a bigger tent like this. It's because with 2 people, you end up sharing gear. So when I'm alone and I'm bringing this tent, I have to bring, so this tent weighs 4.5 pounds. This tent weighs 6 pounds. But when I'm separate, when I got 2 people, one person carries the poles and maybe the fly, and then the other person carries the pegs and the main body. And so you separate the weight in 2. But for a base camping trip where we're not going too far and we're going to spend a couple of days, we bring the comfort of the 3-man tent. So so I just wanted to show tents. So that's the first thing. Okay. Now the next thing you need is something to sleep in, and I'm going to start with the sleeping bags. This is Karen's bag. Karen likes this, like this sleeping bag, as far as I'm concerned, is very heavy. This is a very typical old-fashioned bag. This is the one that I carry. If I could put them on a scale, I'm guessing this is about 2.5 pounds and this is 1.5 pounds. And but Karen is cold at night and she likes this kind of style. So I'll show you the difference. So this is some people like a very square sleeping bag. So this is a square sleeping bag. I don't know what the temperature rating of this one is, but it's fairly heavy, but it's very, very warm. So Karen likes this sleeping bag. Now, the advantage of a square sleeping bag, some people do this, some people will take 2 square sleeping bags, and if you have 2 identical square sleeping bags, you can actually zip them together, which is really interesting, and make one big double bag. But Karen likes her square sleeping bag. Now I like a mummy sleeping bag, and this is synthetic material, whereas this is real goose down. But you'll see that the reason a mummy sleeping bag is shaped to save space, so there's no extra volume at the bottom. It's shaped to fit the size of your body. And the other thing that the mummy sleeping bag does is it's better at trapping the heat inside the sleeping bag. So I'll get into this one and I'll demonstrate. This sleeping bag you can put this around your head, and then zip it from the inside, and then you can pull on this draw, and then once I do that, I can, so this is a mummy sleeping bag. So not very good for rolling around in, you're trapped in it, but there's a small space, so your body heat stays nice and warms up quickly. There's not a lot of wasted space inside, and there's not a lot of wasted material. But as you can see, if you were in a panic and you needed to get out, it might not be that easy. But so that's one style. That's the mummy. Whereas one of these big boys, which I'm not a big fan of because it's just too darn heavy. Depends on the kind of sleeper you are. Woohoo. This one you can see it doesn't trap your heat. So this is old. I don't know why Karen still uses this one, but she likes it and I'm not gonna argue. All right, now. Okay, all right.
Okay, so mine is kind of like the big box one.
But it's synthetic.
Okay. It's still got a nice lining on the inside. It's huge.
So this one is a full. This is cotton. Karen's is more or less cotton, which I don't advise. That's an older sleeping bag, modern. Only rated for 4 degrees Celsius, so you need it to be warm to go in this one. And this is square synthetic. So this is synthetic. This is synthetic. You might as well show us yours, Ray, if you want. How to open it up, buddy,
Yeah.
or how do you sleep in it, Ray?
So, I'm puny, and this is pretty huge. When I get in here, I like get all the way inside there.
All right, so Ray sleeps like that, which is not advised because all the condensation from your breath goes inside your sleeping bag and you'll get cold. So learning to sleep in a sleeping bag is important too. My advice is get one that's properly rated, and there's another component, there's the matting underneath, but get one that's properly rated for the conditions you're in. Get a synthetic one and sleep in it in light clothing, like just underwear and a t-shirt, or naked if necessary. Because you'll get hot in there, and if you're wearing clothes and your clothes get all sweaty, the sleeping bag won't work properly. So you need your body heat needs to come through a little bit through the sleeping bag. One quick trick that I've done on some trips is you can take this, or vice versa. Don't ever underestimate that you can do this. You can take, like, these are both light. I've done winter camping where what I do is I take this and I put it in there, and then you can easily double up and have a very warm system now because you got an inner and an outer shell. I'm just gonna show one last sleeping bag. This is the one I use most often. This one here, I use this one when weight is a concern, when I want really light weight, but this one's only good for 4 degrees Celsius. This one is also a mummy, but you can tell right away it's a little bit bigger. And this mummy is good for -5, so there's about a 10-degree difference between this little one and this little one. So July, August, or even September, if I'm concerned about weight, I'll bring this one, and I might sleep in a fleece. This one is definitely when it's cold and I'm only doing short trips and weight's less of a concern, I bring that one. There's a sleeping bag in this one too, but this, I just wanted to show, people have probably seen this. This is a compression bag. So once you stuff your bag in there, your sleeping bag, if you pull on these straps, then you can, it's crazy how small you can get. So this bag, the sleeping bag that's in here is like the orange one. It's a down 500 gram 0 degrees Celsius bag. So it's almost this one, but stuffed in a compression sack, and it can be quite compressed. Now, an important thing when you're not using your gear, then don't, especially down bags, don't stuff them in the bag and leave them stored in the bag. You hang them like that, wide open, so they stay fluffed up. All right. Okay. So for dealing with the inclement weather, you got your tent, you got your sleeping bag. Now putting that directly on the ground sucks. So there's 2-3 things you can do. And if you're really, really weight conscious, you can bring cheap foam. See a lot of people with these. And now this is what we call 3/4 lengths, because if you really think about it, when Ray, you want actually, if you really think about it, you only need to really worry about your back. I used one of these for years because it keeps your back warm, and the bottom of your feet are not as likely to get cold. So if you're really weight conscious, you can bring a roll like this. Now the reality is, I've evolved from this. I'll show you what I've evolved over the years. So right now this is reserved for Tika. Now, but after the foam, a little bit heavier but a little more luxurious are the inflatables. And even the inflatables come in 3/4 length. So for the longest time, I had an inflatable like this. So I had a 3/4 length inflatable, which is about the same length as this, but it weighs a little more, not a whole heck of a lot. So got the 3/4. But modern technology, the makers of Thermarest bring us this bad boy. So Thermarest, again, same makers, but now they bring this thing that is so light, it'll take me a few seconds to, you might want to stop and I'll show when it's... Look at that. Twice as thick, full length. So, and the same weight, or I think this one is actually even less weight. So this is my go-to now. I mean, whew. Yeah, you're on 2 inches of air. Sometimes I've even let out a little bit just to sink into it. So that is comfortable. So you got the basics now. So let's assemble. Let's show it. So Ray, do you want to bring me the orange sleeping bag there, please? Just gonna set up. Okay, that's my solo setup. Just let's set up this 2-man. Got the gear out. Let's set it up. Gonna pass me the purple sleeping bag, Ray. Okay, so far I'm leaning, this is my current setup right now. Now, I told you the tent and the pad and the sleeping bag is one system for shelter and sleep. This is the other one. So you see a lot of guys these days are going with the hammock, but the hammock, but the thing when you have a hammock, you need a tarp over it. And this isn't even the correct tarp. I need a longer tarp for this hammock, but I'm not a hammock guy. And my opinion is that the only win of a hammock over a tent is possibly the comfort of the sleep. Some guys just can't get used to sleeping on the ground for whatever reason and are not comfortable sleeping on the ground, and they find it extremely comfortable to sleep in a hammock. So I would say for some people, the advantage of the hammock in terms of the comfort of the sleep wins out. But in terms of weight, it's a toss, because by the time you get a hammock that weighs, 2 pounds and a tarp, you're already reaching the same weight as the tent. And honestly, in a storm condition or a day where it's really raining, I can be in a tent with my awning and I can actually cook under my tent, and I can sit there and read a book. I can have somebody in there and play a card game, and they'll argue, the guys who are in these things will argue the same thing. They'll argue that once this is set up, that they have the same shelter as a tent. I disagree, because unless you get a bigger tarp that goes right to the ground, you still have wind coming through. So this does not, an awning, a tarp does not match a tent. But in terms of comfort, these things are I don't disagree, and sorry, but well, right now I'm sleeping in it like I'm like a banana, which is incorrect. I need to be sleeping at sideways, but I can't even do it here in my yard, because you've just seen the second disadvantage of this setup is that unless there's trees, I can't find a proper setup. This isn't even the proper trees, and I got a lot of flexibility. I can bring different straps and everything, but if I'm above the tree line, which you see on a lot of my videos, there are no trees, so the hammock does not work. So it's just my opinion. I'm not a hammock guy. I don't sleep in a hammock. They're fun for lounging around in a permanent camp. So if I'm going somewhere and I'm doing a base camp and a day camp, I can bring a one-person hammock to have a little bit of fun at night or whatever, but I am not a hammock sleeper. I don't think the advantages are enough. I prefer my tent, because my tent gives me space, gives me definitely a lot more protection in inclement weather, protects the rest of my gear, and it can be set up in snow, and it can be set up above the tree line where there's no trees, so the tent is so much more flexible in terms of setup. So I talked about the risks. So the risks that I need to mitigate are weather. So we talked about the shelter and the sleeping, and that's covered. Now the next thing you have to worry about for weather is clothing, and I have a whole video just on clothing. So and for me right now, I'll just talk real quick because I'm going to repack when I'm done. But I hike with the clothes that I usually wear. On a very short trip, you don't need a ton of clothes. So, in the bottom of my bag here, got a pair of gloves in case it gets cold. I got an extra 2 pairs of socks. I got a t-shirt for sleeping in. That's the shirt that I sleep in, as opposed to the shirt that I walk in. And I got a pair of fleece for around camp and stuff like that. And then, you see me in a lot of videos, I always have a toque and a fleece jacket. And there's actually here, I'll even say not food, sorry. There's a rain jacket. Okay, so without getting into a whole ton of detail, because I got a separate video on just the clothing, but I need to bring clothes because I could get caught in a storm. So typically the clothes, important clothes is something that's windproof, waterproof, and the clothes I'm wearing and the clothes for at night. So clothing. So I think we've mitigated everything against cold. So if we get caught in the cold, we got clothes, we got a good shelter, we're all good. All right, now an easy mitigation, and I got a whole chapter on that, is animals. So I'm not fundamentally worried about animals. A lot of people are worried about animals. Do not let animals worry you and detract you from hiking. So the number one thing you can take in the woods, take a bear spray. And I have a whole video on how to use the bear spray and mitigation against encounters with a bear. So there's several things you can do. If you definitely hike as a group, make lots of noise. It's about using your brains, right? Let the bears know that you are in the area, and then they will generally get out of the way. And then at night, if it makes you feel comfortable, hang your food up in the tree, keep it separate, have your bear spray, and all those things. So, but I am not, I've said it many times, and I can go into whole debate on this thing. Me personally, I'm not worried about bears. Where I have a lot of encounters over the years has been with those darn porcupines. They come and destroy equipment. So so animal is a risk. The consequences of an encounter with an animal are pretty severe. In terms of a big animal like a bear, it can hurt you, and a small animal, the consequences are they can damage your gear, they can make getting out tough, they can eat some of your food. And mitigating against animals is fairly simple. It's bear spray, and it's a lot of common sense. It's making noise, it's keeping your camp fairly clean, and it's being aware of your surroundings. You know, if you come into an area that has and you see a porcupine, I suggest you move on and go camp somewhere else. So mitigating against animals is second risk. Okay, stop. One of the other risks I talk about is the risk of mechanical breakdown. If you're going on a small trip with a couple of people, typical mechanical breakdowns are actually, you know what, I haven't had a lot of mechanical breakdowns. I mean, you can avoid a lot of mechanical breakdowns by buying good gear. You know, good boots, good backpacks, good tents. You're not going to have mechanical breakdowns. But I'll show you a couple of things that I carry. So, I carry a small pack, and in this small pack, I carry a couple of things. Duct tape will get you out of a lot of problems. Zip ties can replace buckles and things like that. You can zip them together and make all sorts of things. I carry an extra strap. You never know what the strap's going to be, you know, when you're going to need a strap. I got a repair kit for my thermarest, just because. And that's and again, having a hole in your thermarest is not a deal breaker. I mean, if you sleep one night on the ground, it's not going to kill you, right? And so and most failures you have with your backpack aren't going to kill you. They're not going to hurt. Neither is a failure with a boot. I mean, there's not a lot of failures that, if you're going on an overnight trip, there's not a lot of failures that are going to make the trip, you know, a disaster. You'll recover from most failures. But you know, bring a couple of things. A little bit of rope. I mean, I'll talk about rope again, but you know, so I carry a little kit. It's just the way it is. I have a little kit here. And I carry a few items in my kit, and it gets me, I mean, the old duct tape gets you by on a lot of issues. Pick up the strap. Put the strap back in there. Okay, so a little mechanical failure kit that goes here that I forget about. Actually, here, I'm gonna put it in. I'm gonna put it in where I usually put it in, which for me is in a pouch right there. Forgot about it. Okay, under tools and repair equipment, I just want to show one other really neat little tool that I bring. It's not even a tool; it's just a trick. This is. You know, the typical tent comes with poles like this, you know, so this is the pole. Now, if you break this pole somewhere, now, honestly, that tent, this lunar light from North Face that I've used for 20 years almost, never had a problem with it. Just recently replaced it. But piece of tubing, hollow piece of tubing, if I were to break this connection or break a tube somehow or whatever, one way to repair this is, where it's broken, is you can actually use the tube as a crude joint to fix it. So let's say it breaks here or breaks somewhere, you can use a tube, and I put the tube, and then I could use duct tape. So it's very, very, very crude, but it's a little piece of aluminum tubing. You can get copper tubing, you can even get plastic tubing. So just gets you out of a bind. But boy, if you lose your tent overnight and you don't have a tent, you're sleeping under the stars and you do something. I mean, humans have been doing it forever and ever, so you're not gonna die if you lose your tent. But, you know, carrying it is handy. Okay, drop it. Just a good old-fashioned Swiss Army knife. You don't need a Bowie knife or anything crazy, just a small knife. So I bring a knife, and it's in a sleeve. And then a tool that I'm very fond of, because where I hike, I often make campfires, is this handy folding saw that weighs, you know, 150 grams. So that's really nice. And then finally, lastly, in the category of tools are different ropes. Now, over the years, I used to bring this climbing rope, and 50 feet of this weighs a pound. I don't carry this anymore. Nowadays, I tend to carry paracord or something a lot lighter. So paracord for the same length has the same strength as this and weighs next to nothing. And the paracord can be used if you have a place where you can haul a food bag up in a tree. It can replace shoelaces on your boots. It can even be a belt. You can braid it together and use that as a strap for your backpack. It has multiple uses. But generally speaking, the most common thing I use the cord for is in the morning I stretch it out and then I dry my gear, because I like to start the day with dry gear. But I always have in my pack 2-3 lengths of rope. Now, I got a whole video on this alone, which is, so you need to eat while you're out there. And I have a whole video on my cook set, which I've simplified over the years. So what I generally take on my cook set, and I'll show it again, is I take, actually for me, cooking is one pot. This steel pot, this stainless steel pot, you can see it's been blackened because I use it on campfires all the time. Now, I can go lighter in by getting a titanium pot. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Titanium is lighter, but it doesn't diffuse the heat as well as stainless steel. Depends on whether you're using it to cook or just to boil water or whatever. So I use both. It depends on the trip. It depends on how long I'm going and how conscious I am for weight. If I'm extremely conscious about weight, I bring titanium. If I'm less conscious about weight and I'm going on a shorter trip, the durability of the stainless steel and its ability to transfer heat is the one I use. But without getting into a whole lot of detail, because I have another video, my cook set usually consists of a pot, a scooper for water. Once the water's boiling, I can use the scooper to transfer water out. You'll see hanging on the side of my pack, I bring one mug. I eat everything out of this mug or out of this bowl. A pot gripper, which is handy. Couple of spoons. You don't need knives because you got a knife on your Swiss Army knife if you need it. You don't need a fork and separate things. You're not being in civilization. You're not eating a 9-course meal like you eat at home. It's a little bit different. A scrubber, a little bit of dish soap. This little gizmo is for the propane canisters, and on a summer trip, generally in the summer, I'm going very quickly here, but in the summer I bring this stove, which screws on top of the propane canister. So in the summer I'm relying on propane and I'm using a small stove. Now the reality for me is I make fires all the time and I seldom use my stove. But I have a separate video that talks about the difference between a propane stove and a liquid stove. In the summer, where propane vaporizes quickly, I bring propane stove. And I bring, this is a windscreen that can go around my stove. So this is my basic cook gear. This is my basic cook gear in the summer when I think I'm going to have a lot of access to firewood to make fires, and I'm relying on fires to cook. This is my basic cook gear right here, and I have a separate video on that. But if I'm going in the winter or in the off season where it's colder, I prefer to bring my whisper light, and I have a video on that as well. And the whisper light uses liquid fuel, this Coleman fuel. And the reason I prefer this is because it's actually more efficient. I get a lot more heating time with liquids, and liquids work better in cold conditions, because when it gets too cold, this gas doesn't vaporize properly, whereas liquid, you can just pressure it up. So I got a separate video on that. But the fascinating thing is, if you can't see it on there, but this is $11.99. That's a rip-off. So like 110 grams of fuel is $11.99. I can get a whole jug of white gas for $15 in our local hardware store, and then the fuel for the liquid stove comes in. I can put it in different little bottles. So if I'm going on a 3-day trip or 2 nights, I bring this much. If I'm going on 5 days, I bring this much. And if I'm going on a 10-day trip, I bring this much fuel. So it's a matter of preference. Generally speaking, for somebody going on an overnight trip, which is the purpose of this video, grab yourself a little propane stove, bring one of these or 2 of these, boil some water, and you'll be just fine. Show this. When I go on long family trips, when we go 5 of us, the stainless steel pot that is in there is called the Alpine Set by MSR, and this pot nests inside that one. So I can put 2 pots. So I get a 2-liter pot and a 1.5 liters. And sometimes I'll even bring a small aluminum pot like this, so I can boil just a small amount of water and extra spoons. So, and you've seen these things. These are fantastic. These are barbecue fire starters. People have told me, people have shown me how they make them at home and whatnot. Seriously, life's too short. I buy a box of these for about $5.99. There's 16 cubes in there. A typical cube can start a fire under the wettest conditions. When I get a lot of firewood, I can cut it in half when it's fairly dry, and make 2 fires out of this. So this will last me an entire season for $5. I'm not gonna make fire starter at home. Nick was pointing out that this video is going to get long. It is going to get long, but so be it. Another thing I want to talk about is just boots. Again, without getting into huge details, what do you need to start hiking? If you're going on your very first trip and you've never been on a hiking trip and all you have is a pair of running shoes, take your running shoes. You ain't going to go wrong with them. But here's what I do. This is my preference. Me personally, I like this is a Scarpa. This is a full leather with Gore-Tex interior. I had a pair of these that lasted about 3 years. I did 1,000 or more kilometers on them. I like a full leather boot that's tight on my foot. It's just my personal choice, but I tend to carry a fairly big weight. My philosophy is that on a long trip, I carry a lot of weight and no luxuries. On a short trip, I carry almost the same amount of weight. It's just that I replace, I bring more luxuries. I always bring the same amount of weight. I always bring 45 pounds no matter what. So short trip, lots of luxuries. Long trip, no luxuries, just more food. But I tend to hike in these boots. My wife Karen likes, this is a cloth boot almost, and it is way lighter. I mean, I can tell it's about half the weight of the full leather boots. And they say that a pound of weight on your feet is like carrying 5 pounds on your back. You do feel it after a while, but I've tried so many things over the years. I cannot hike in anything but a full leather boot. This doesn't work for me. But if you're going on a one night, overnight, 10 kilometers in, 10 kilometers out, you're just getting started in the sport, you can either go in running shoes, which I see a lot of people out there, or you can bring a pair of, this is a $150 pair of boots as opposed to $400 for a pair of boots. But what I personally bring is my expensive boots, and for around camp, I bring $3 pair of Crocs that I buy at the dollar store. And I use these Crocs for just walking around camp once I'm there at the end of the day. And you've seen in videos when I have to ford rivers, I pull these out, put them on, and I ford a river with them. So So that's my go-to setup. Nothing too complicated. Almost at the end of this video. I get asked about walking sticks. Again, it depends on the duration of the trip and the kind of terrain I'm going in. I like one walking stick. Some people walk with two. I like one. One with a proper metal stick with adjustable heights, like this one, is really fantastic. You can adjust it to whatever height you want. You can make it longer when you're going downhill. You use it to brace yourself going downhill. It assists when going uphill. It's really useful when crossing creeks and you're walking on logs and things like that. So on shorter trips, I bring these. Don't ask me why. I'm a purist. I've had walking sticks that I've made. If you forget your stick at home, there's nothing wrong with just collecting a piece of wood and making a walking stick. And I tend to favor a wooden walking stick for a lot of reasons. It just feels good on my hand. I've made this one. I got about 3 of them in the house. And if I leave the house without a stick, I'll make one when I'm there. They're useful for moving embers in the fire, because this you'll damage the end. So you can use this when you're working your fire. You can use it when you're crossing. It's a defensive weapon. If a bear comes at you, you can smack him with this thing. So a walking stick is useful, and I wouldn't be sad if I left it in the bush or forgot it. So just a preference. I bring one. I don't bring 2. All right. Okay, so you've got all of this set up, you got all your stuff. The last question is, how do you carry all this gear? Well, let me show you a couple things. So you guys have seen me. This pack is a humongous pack. This is an Arc'teryx Bora 95. So it's a 95 liter pack. It's about as big a pack as you can possibly get, and it actually becomes bigger than 90 liters because if I leave this extended and I loosen these straps, I can put the lid higher up and I can carry about 110 liters. 110 liters is an expedition sized pack. It's enough gear. I can carry enough supplies in there for easily a 12-day trip. Now, I like this pack. It is extremely comfortable. We'll load it in a minute and I'll put it on. I bring this pack for everything. So even if I'm doing an overnight trip, I bring this pack. I just love this pack. But you don't need to buy a 95 liter pack. My sons, I have lots of packs, but just to show it in comparison, this is 70 liters. And we're gonna load them both, but this is 70 liters, and any pack, and that's a $500 pack, and this is a $190 pack, and I guarantee you, if you're going overnight on your very first trip and you don't know if you're gonna like it or not, my suggestion is to get about a 70 liter pack. And don't spend much more than 200 bucks, and you're still going to get a really, really good pack. I hike a lot, and I still only use my pack about 25 to 30 nights a year, and it's in great shape. If you're just a weekend warrior, a pack like this will last you a lifetime, and 199 bucks, you're not going to go wrong with it. But 70 liters is about the perfect size for anything up to about 4 nights. So, and I'm just showing this one. I don't... This one is my wife Karen's pack, and hers it's 75. It's supposedly a little bit bigger, but it's a female pack, and apparently it has a slightly different hip. But Lord, if I would know what the difference between one or the other pack is. I mean, she likes it. And again, this one was even cheaper. This is a brand that doesn't even exist anymore. Trek, I think. I think this was about $110 15 years or 10 years ago. So it just shows that most modern gear is very well made. So I would say if you're new to the sport, get yourself a 65 to 70 liter pack. Don't spend a fortune until you know what you like. Don't spend a fortune on any gear until you know what you like. Put this all away. So bottom compartment here. This is just me. Everybody can pack their own way, but in the bottom I put my sleeping bag and my cook gear. So if
if I need to, during the day, if I need to access my cook gear, I'll be able to access it without having to dig too far for it. And I throw in the saw in there and a little bit of fuel. And that is the bottom of my pack. Then on the belt, the pocket knife on one side, on the belt on the other side, the bear spray and a water bottle. Now, in the main compartment, normally I would put heavier items near the bottom. So this would be food. This is only like one night's worth of food, but there's a bit of food near the bottom. And then near the bottom, my first aid kit. I mean, you can tell I don't need to be very careful with this right now because I'm going on a short trip, theoretically. My clothes that I put in a dry bag. Now, the dry bag can be served for a lot of things. I keep my clothes. You can carry with your bag. The bag's fairly waterproof, but if it's going to pour rain, the bag's going to get wet. So I have a bag cover. If I'm going on a 7-day trip, I will bring a bag cover. If I'm going on a 2-day trip, I ain't bringing a bag cover. The way to use these dry bags, if you've never seen one, is you blow the air out of them and then you just roll them and then clip them. So this is dry. Make sure it goes right to the bottom. There. My rain gear. Now, normally on top here now would be all of this space there that's left there is for food, and there's enough room there for about 7 days of food, 2 pounds a day. Now, the reason I like this pack is because it has this external pouch here, and that's where I put the tent. So some people end up hanging their tent on the back. You know, there's straps here that can be used for a lot of things, but for me, everything is in the pack. So the tent is in the pack and protected. And then my Crocs, they usually get dirty, or I want them handy in case I gotta cross a creek. So the Crocs for me go on both sides like that. All right. Now, this would be all food in here, but since there is no food today, I'd be adding 2 pounds of food, but I'm just gonna close the pack. And then that's that. Now, the top pouch, I put in things that are more useful on the top pouch. So actually I got a couple of lighters here. There's leftover drink packets from before. Flashlight goes on top. I'm just going to throw my rope on top. This is a dirty water bottle, so I can scoop dirty water and pass it through the filter. The filter weighs nothing, so even though I drink a lot of creek water, I bring that on there. Normally on top here would be things like maybe a map, maybe my GPS, my phone, a couple of things like that go on top. This inside pocket here, some toilet paper, toothpaste, toothbrush, a little bit of soap. And that goes in there. And I buckle the top. Now the only thing that goes on the side for me on this pack is this thermarest. And this thermarest goes here, pass through this strap. By passing through there, guarantees that I won't lose it for some reason. And then just for show, I got a couple of carabiners that can be used for whatever. And then my handy dandy water mug, because because if I stop at a creek, I can scoop up and get some water. My handy dandy water mug goes on the side there. Done. I'm packed. And this pack, maybe, we'll weigh it in a minute here, maybe 25 pounds. So this pack is ready to go. All that's missing in this pack is a bit of food. Oh, and I got a really cool, ready for this? That's called the sound grenade. So if a bear attacks me and I don't have time to reach for the bear spray, I can pull this and maybe distract him. Never had to use it. But there's my pack, and I can go running with it. And like I said, if I was going overnight right now, I pack everything that's here solo. If I'm going with a friend, then I would take out, probably I would ask the friend to carry the cook gear or maybe the fuel or something like that, or break up the tent. But I would take a bit of my own gear and share with a friend. And then on a 2-day trip, I'd add 2 days worth of food, and that's it. And I'm going like this, and I got no problem walking long distances with this. And if I'm going only on 2 days, then I want to add luxuries like a book for reading, a deck of cards, some dice to play games, maybe extra batteries for my camera, a couple of luxury items, that's it. And if I'm going on a 7-day trip, well, it's this and just a whole lot of food. Alright, so last little bit of the video. Zero. That boy weighs what today? 183.9. Let's call it 184 pounds. I don't think we need proof. 184 pounds. Big boy pay 184 pounds. I'm wearing a shirt. 184 pounds. And after with the pack, hi Tika, 184. 216, let's say 217. So 17 plus 16 is 33. Is it 33? So 33 pounds. So 33 pounds is pretty manageable. So it's 33 pounds, and then a pound per day or 2 pounds per day for food. So if you're going overnight, you know, 2.5 pounds. So we're talking 33, 40 pounds. It's no big deal. I mean, you could shave a couple of things on there. If the weather's going to be really gorgeous and you want to take a chance, lower the weight of the bit of clothing. But you know, I have guys who will argue about the ultralight aspect. It's the tent that weighs a bit. You share the tent with somebody else. You're getting your weight down. You know, you're sub 40, you're sub 35, so it's not a big deal. So my point is, I hope you enjoyed the video. It's I went through this quickly. There are links because this is a hiking 101, but I have videos on safety, making fires, bears, clothing, food, other aspects. Plus, you can watch all the videos. So I'll make this video, and then I'll link to other appropriate videos on there. But my point is this: enjoy the sport. Get out there, buy some cheap gear, get some friends, get on a popular trail, and go and stay overnight and start learning this sport. And you can't go wrong. You're not going to endanger yourself. People don't die doing this sport. It's a very safe, very enjoyable, very fun sport that you can do with friends, alone, or with family. So Martyupnorth saying, get out there, get off the beaten path, and go discover the country.